Welcome into episode 201. Be sure you're following us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at by CA Simmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. Spring game happened.
Spring game did happen. Let's just off the top again. I'm sure if you're an audio listener, which is like the vast majority of our audience, I'm sure you love how every week we have to start with some kind of caveat for the YouTube audience. The caveat this week is that we are both in my apartment because Bailey's staying with me, obviously, since he lives in Tampa, and there is just nowhere in this apartment where a two-person podcast setup is working. So we're very uncomfortably close together on the couch right now, and that's why we have this strange background and look like this.
Let's say I'm not enjoying this. Like, we're just very shoulder to shoulder. I'm like hunched over, making sure the microphones are not in the shot. This is a very professional podcast. I hope you guys have realized by now how professional we are and how good we are at this.
This was a particularly hard challenge. I'm running into the thing now. I'm trying to figure out, should I look at you or should I look at the screen when I talk?
We've done in-person podcasts before. This isn't any different.
Not this close together. This is tight quarters right now, but we'll get through it. We'll get through it. The spring game happened. KJ Jefferson is a terrible quarterback. The offensive line needs multiple transfers. The run defense is still bad if you ignore that was the second team defense, as I did for much of the first quarter.
Yeah.
Doom and gloom. Is that the vibe?
I don't care. I don't care about really anything that happened. Well, that's not exactly true, but I don't care about most things that happen. I'm not putting much of anything into it. I think, like we talked about on the preview podcast, it was about who was it wasn't really about who was starting with the ones and twos, because it was more so they were kind of rotating them in and out. But you kind of got a feel for who the important players are right now, who they're looking at and giving looks to. And there was a lot of that, and that was cool, and that was good to know. There were a couple players that popped that I think like maybe wouldn't have been on everyone's radar until tonight. And not saying it's a guarantee that they're going to be, stars or world beaters in, this fall, but we've seen in the past couple of years where guys have broken out in the spring game. And the unfortunate one that I've always remember is RJ Harvey breaking out in the 2021 spring game, and then he tore his ACL. We didn't get to see him until 2022. So that was good. And I guess, where do you want to start? Do you want to start with KJ, I guess?
We can start with KJ. And to be clear, I was joking off the top. Yeah. It's a spring game. I know that some fans on Twitter are taking it a little whatever, but this was kind of what we talked about with KJ, right? In our preview pod, was that there's nowhere for him to go but down, because the fan base had kind of anointed him as a Heisman level quarterback, and it's a spring game and it doesn't really matter and it doesn't indicate anything. But he threw 2 picks. One of them was not his fault. Chauncey Magwood, it was right to his chest, and he sort of weirdly bobbled and then pushed it over to a defender.
It's what Javon Baker and Kobe Hudson both did at separate times last year.
It was very
Javon did it twice. He said it would never happen again.
And then he did it again. He tweeted that will never happen again, and then it in fact did happen again. So, but I think it's cool that legacy has been carried on. That's like a fun little spicy element to add to the team each year when you're always wondering if a wide receiver may hand the ball to a defender. The second pick was KJ's fault. I don't remember who the target was, but it was to the end zone. It was right to the chest of a defender.
Yeah. I think it was Xavier Townsend.
KJ's throwing, I guess, was a little bit of a surprise to me, just because it felt very sporadic throughout the night. Is that a word for it? It's just he has a cannon of an arm. He can get the ball downfield like it's nothing. But some throws were really good. Some throws were really not. It was just kind of a little all over the place. And that's not what the vibe has been from people who've been out of practice. People who've been at practice have said that he's really effective with the long ball, and maybe the short range passing is where he falls short a little bit. Some of his biggest moments tonight were off of short range passes. It was Jared Baker breaking free off what I think was like an 8 or 9 yard through the air pass for 70 yards. It was it Chauncey Magwood who had another big one?
Yeah, all the way down to the 2-yard line. Yeah. So there were big plays, big explosive plays here and there. And it kind of almost gives you an insight into the fact, like, Gus Malzahn wasn't lying when he was talking about the past scrimmages. Like he does kind of say what happens, because there are a few plays here and there. Because I always thought he's just kind of saying like things were even. Things were pretty even. I mean, like, there were a few explosives, and then the defense had like 5 or 6 or 7 sacks, I think, total. And a couple of them came from the linebackers.
Now, the caveat to throw in there that's different from a scrimmage is the first team offense was competing against the second team defense, and the second team offense was competing against the first team defense. So that was part of why I think there were some alarm bells with some of the stuff on the offense, because you're seeing this happen. You're saying these are the backups, like they should be running them off the field. And that's not happening. But again, it's a spring game. It just doesn't mean much of anything, particularly for the offense. It's like you're always going to see a very vanilla sort of chill, like the coaches aren't going out there with a killer instinct, like we have to score a billion points. It's just it's a spring game. But I thought, as far as good things with KJ, he had 2 touchdowns, and they were both really solid plays. He's huge. He's a very large man. I think we all knew that. He's also when he doesn't, and again, he was two-hand touch, so it's you can't get a true sense of his running ability. But what's interesting about him, and we kind of knew this from his time at Arkansas, was the two things are, one, he is faster than I was expecting. There was one play where he took off and he was booking it. I mean, he obviously wasn't JRP fast, but I thought of it as more of a tank. He was pretty quick. The other thing is he seems really good about avoiding contact and not taking unnecessary hits. But when he gets running, it's like freight train. Like he almost bulldozed the guy even in two-hand touch. It's just like, I mean, I think that teams are going to have a really, really hard time containing that part of his game. And that was clear from all his time at Arkansas, but it was just kind of cool to see it with your own eyes for the first time. You know?
I'm not worried about anything from him tonight. I think, like you said, that was one of the things that stood out, was he was just massive. Like he walked into the press conference room after the game, and I was just like, I knew he was big, but like just seeing him in person, this guy's giant. He's a monster. But I think there was good and bad from him. I think there was good and bad from a lot of people. I think the other thing was funny. It was one of those, because he was two-hand touch. There was one where he kind of broke away, and I honestly think if it was a real game, it would have been touchdown, because someone did technically get two hands on him from behind, but I feel like you're not wrapping him up like that. Like
it was a desperation, like just getting their hands out to tap his back, and they blew it dead. He was gone.
I think even if they try to tackle him there, he just kind of steps through the tackle and continues to
What's crazy with him is he gets even with the linebackers, and he looks like one of them. Yeah, like that's his size is incredible. The only other thing with the offense that and I will say, and Bailey was talking me off the ledge a little bit, because if you've listened to this podcast, you may notice that I have a tendency to overreact to things and perhaps get a little hyperbolic. The O-line didn't have a good spring game, and I was particularly bothered by this because like there were several times where it wasn't just like, oh, they're not protecting KJ. Like there were 3 or 4 plays where the O-line just got blown up. Like, and part of that is the defense was playing very aggressive, but a lot of times it's like the guy getting through and making the sack is like a walk-on or someone you are never going to see. The second interception on KJ was
Nicholas Antoine
that we're probably never going to see on the field. So that was alarming to me, because it just felt like the O-line, particularly at right tackle, perhaps has issues. And again, it's a spring game, and I'm probably deeply overreacting, and it's not a big deal, but it's just one of those things where we talked about so many iterations of the O-line last year and how they all worked, and it was a little jarring to see that back down to earth.
This is where you wonder, like, try to read between the lines and wonder what you're seeing and wonder what is just being said just to say it. Because I think a lot of people up there were thinking, like, I don't know, Paul Rubelt didn't have the greatest game, but playing right tackle, like he didn't look very good.
Yeah.
Had some struggles. And then Gus gets in the press conference and says, oh, he had a great spring. Like, we're really happy with how much he's improved and all this stuff. I'm like, how much of that is boosting him up and pumping him up? And maybe it is. Maybe he did have a really good spring, and just tonight wasn't the greatest night, or maybe there were certain things they're trying. You never really know for sure, but I do wonder, and we talked about this even before the game, before we saw tonight, was like, I didn't think that they had enough depth at tackle, and I think they probably go out and try to get a tackle if they can.
Right, in a big way. And I'm torn, because we saw what I believe that was just, they were just showing us the starting line. I don't think there was any like.
I have it here. It was Amari Kite left tackle, Adrian Medley at guard, Caden Kittler at center, Marcellus Marshall at right guard, and then Paul Rubelt at right tackle.
And Kittler at center isn't a huge surprise. I think we all, I didn't say we all, but I think that had been out there a little bit, that he had beaten out Jabari Brooks for that. So we'll see if that's still true by fall camp, but there you go. I don't think Walt Claire I think Walt Claire's going to be an awesome player down the road. I don't think he was necessarily in it this year, but I love the idea of Paul Rubelt after the years of kind of being like a fan favorite, and this guy everyone knew, like getting out there, he just didn't do well. But again, it's a spring game. Like we just have to, we as podcasters and you as an audience both have to do a good job over the next 5 months of not taking this game, this half to be clear, and defining what we think about the team through it, because it's the first UCF football we've seen in 3 months. It's the last we're going to see for 5 months. Your brain just wants to
that's why
with it,
Yeah, that's why I kind of laughed as we were walking back to the press box, and you said, like, you're like, I have to kind of watch my tone on this podcast, and I was like, you and I have talked all like for weeks about not reading anything into spring ball, and now we've had a half of a spring game, and you're getting ready to like go on and say things.
I'm watching a walk-on carve up an O-line on multiple possessions, I get a little uneasy. Like I understand really it's a spring game. Maybe he's an amazing walk-on, but that was my only, of all the things in the spring game, everything you just chalk up to, it's a spring game. The only thing where I don't know. And we'll know how serious it is. The portal opens in a few days here. We'll know how serious it is when we see who they target. If all these tackles are tweeting UCF offers, then we'll know that this is a real concern. If UCF's randomly like, we need a receiver or something, then, I feel better about receiver probably.
I think so.
Than I did before, which again is dumb because it's a spring game and we shouldn't be taking anything away. But it was, Jared Baker, if you want to pick like the star of the game that we talk about. There's always one every year. Jared Baker had a huge game.
Yeah, he did. And then, I mean, Xavier Townsend, as expected, had a good game. He had 6 catches for 100 yards.
He had one play in particular where it was similar to his touchdown against Houston, where he juked out like 4 guys and probably picked up an extra 15 on the ground on that play.
Jared Baker had the 71-yard touchdown catch that he really did most of the work on. He caught a short pass from KJ and took it the rest of the way. But he also had a 23-yard run. And so, like, you saw him and you just kind of saw his speed. He was one of the guys that was included in like the fastest man competition and then the kind of the second half of all the spring game stuff. So very clearly has really good speed. Chauncey Magwood obviously had that one where he tipped it right to the defender. That was Christian Peterson, a freshman.
The freshman, I don't want to derail us, but the freshman
we'll get there.
Defense,
I was gonna say,
my God.
Yeah. But so and then Chauncey Magwood kind of made up for that. He did the same thing kind of where he took a short pass and then evaded a bunch of guys and took it down to the 2-yard line. So, I mean, maybe there's something there because we were like last year we were hoping like, oh, maybe he's a good. You drafted him, didn't you, in your transfer draft? And it was like maybe last year wasn't the year for him, and it's going to be.
I mean, he opted out of last year.
Yeah, that's right.
Presumably to transfer, and then just didn't, and now he's out there. I mean, we'll see. They still don't like wide receiver 3 isn't necessarily set, but you have contenders now. You have Magwood. Gus brought up Whittemore first when asked about it in post game. We all know Burdell Richardson. Like there appear to be options there. Yeah. So we'll see if they spoke about portal shopping. But
other thing I'm really interested about that Gus said was they're kind of looking at Kylan Fox, the freshman, as kind of a half tight end, half wide receiver. They've been using him some, on the outside, and they think that he can do both.
And when we saw him out there tonight, it was as a receiver.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Which I didn't want to skip over. Randy Pittman caught the first touchdown. I think he looks. He came in. We talked to him tonight, and he just looks the part and feels the part of a guy who's gonna. He looked good as a freshman last year. Like he's gonna take a huge step forward this year. It feels like, and again, that's not even really looking so much into the spring game. More so, just kind of his demeanor, and more so, just like I think he already had a good foundation that he laid last year, and I think he's only gonna get better and better. So
it's a really cool feeling to just see these guys that. These highly rated recruits who UCF had a lot of competition for and landed and just see them blossoming so quickly. Like Randy Pittman, he did not look like a true sophomore. He just didn't. And that's amazing.
You saw that kind of all over the field. On defense, John Walker was like making plays like he was last year. And you saw Nakai Martin. Nakai is not young anymore. We talked about this last year, like Nakai and those guys. But it's more of a thing where like you see them with a starting defense and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. Like that feels good to be like, they hit on this recruit because it's his 3rd year and he feels like, he should be a starter at safety. And
especially when it's guys who you followed the battles and there were all these major programs competing with UCF. Like Nakai had a ton of high level interest, or someone like Braden Marshall, who Auburn desperately tried to get, or someone like, he hasn't broke. Yeah. The Hendersons, Miami went hard after the Hendersons wins. And it's all these guys who, as recently as 5 years ago, just wouldn't have been at UCF. And that's a combo of this coaching staff. That's a combo of them moving to the Power 4, but it's just, I don't know. There's just something so satisfying about seeing guys like that hit. And on the flip side of it, Chasen Johnson, freshman DB, I believe the 2nd or 3rd lowest rated player in this class, running with the first team. On defense.
And I tweeted it during the game. Like I'm all in on him. He maybe awesome. My guy. There was back-to-back plays where the first one was, I think, a play to Johnny. I don't remember if it was a runner pass to Johnny, but he chased down Johnny Richardson. You know how fat we saw him. He won the fastest man thing, the world championship, as Gus kept calling it.
You're moving on from the play already just because it's Johnny in open space and then chased him down.
Yeah, he chased him down. And then the next play, they throw a screen. I don't think it was Johnny, but they throw a screen on like a 3rd and long, and he comes up and he just buckles down and makes like the cleanest form tackle that you'll ever see from a freshman. And I'm just like, all right, that's it. I'm in.
He's running with the first team, man. Yeah. I don't even know what more you can say than that. I mean, not like I said, not only a true freshman, but like what an evaluation job by the staff for it to be one of the guys. Like 247 didn't think he was anything. One of the lowest rated guys in the class, and he's apparently in line to start as a true freshman. That's remarkable.
Yeah, and the funny thing, and this was again, I think I tweeted this my first time in the press box since 2018.
Yeah, good to have you back. I liked having my buddy back in the press box.
And so, but obviously there are a lot of people up there who are more around the team more on a day-to-day basis. I don't even day-to-day, but like they see them more. They know they're at practice. They kind of see who's running with 1s and 2s and all that. And it wasn't even like, I was like, oh wow, Chasen Johnson's like, he's running with the 1s. They're like, yeah, he's been doing that all spring. And I was like, oh, all right. Like, good to know.
This is the point in time where I need to point out, and I showed Bailey the text I sent him 1 month ago where I told him that Chasen Johnson was running with the 1s, and Bailey replied to the text. So you were informed of that.
Yeah, but again, we've talked about this a million times on the podcast, that you send me a lot of things. So sometimes I'll read it and then be like, all right, let me acknowledge the text, and I didn't really kind of grasp it, I don't think. But let's get to, I mean, because Christian Peterson was another one, a true freshman who had the pick.
I thought you were talking about me.
No, not you.
I did not have a pick tonight.
He had the pick. Even like we looked at some of the linebackers, and we kind of saw who was maybe running with the ones like Ethan Barr, Deshaun Pace. Ladarius Tennyson was kind of out there playing as like a nickel, also kind of playing the linebacker, almost like a hybrid, which is kind of, what he's done in the past. But we saw Andrew Harris had a sack on KJ. Well, it would have been a sack because
and that one would have been.
It would have been a sack because he came in clean on him, and there was just nowhere for KJ to go. Although we have seen KJ at Arkansas kind of
take a direct
out of
hit,
those
like a missile, and just doesn't matter. Well, Andrew Harris also isn't going to have to be sacking KJ this year. He'll have to be sacking the other team's smaller and less mobile quarterback.
Yeah. But I really was just kind of, this is a dumb thing to get annoyed about in a spring game, but he had that sack, and then on the next play he was back there again. I think he would have had another sack.
Yeah.
But they said that KJ got the ball. I don't think he did. I think Andrew Harris got there on back-to-back plays.
And Andrew Harris made a big impression.
Troy Ford had a sack later in the game. And so you're seeing, and this was something that X-Ray Alexander talked about, and I think even Gus mentioned it as far as the defense. Their whole thing right now is, being more aggressive and more attacking. And I think I mentioned this a couple of years ago. Maybe it wasn't necessarily last year, but it was like, I feel like they don't blitz that much with their linebackers. I feel like they don't really
a good amount tonight.
And yeah, tonight you saw, like, I think they had like 6 or 7 sacks, and I think like 4 or 5 of them came from linebackers.
There were also a lot of plays where it happened where, and this is what you love to see, where again, it's a spring game, so you don't always necessarily know how real any of this is, but where the offense seemed completely caught off guard.
Yeah.
By the pressure.
Yeah.
And that it looked like a very different defense. And I feel comfortable saying that because that's what we've been hearing throughout spring. It's not like we watched a spring game and we're like, oh yay, they fixed it. I mean, I think the depth they've built at linebacker is going to help them a lot. And I will say Ethan Barr, unfortunately, all indications are he's going to be very good. Unfortunately, tonight, Timmy McClain on this one, like literally put him on his feet.
It was not.
Or took him off his feet, which was unfortunate. But I mean, I think he's going to be solid. We all know what they have with some of the other guys we just talked about. A guy like Andrew Harris, who was so highly recruited and coming in and making an impact. I feel good about the defense.
As a redshirt, he was redshirted last year too, right? So I mean, he's got.
No, he played on special teams.
Did he play all year on special teams? Wow. Yeah, I think I feel there's just we knew this going. There are a lot of guys on defense. Like I feel like, and we kind of got an idea of who is going to be probably in the mix. And obviously Nakai is a guy who was a obvious starter, and you saw Ladarius Tennyson out there a lot. You saw them kind of use Byron Threats like kind of on a rotational basis, and then Antoine Jackson, the ECU transfer, was outside at cornerback, and.
Yep.
And then obviously the defensive line was the usual suspects. You saw, Ricky Barber, John Walker, Lee Hunter.
It wasn't a play that I think you'll see anywhere because it wasn't like it didn't impact anything, but there was a play where John Walker ended up triple teamed and somehow got through all of them in like 2 seconds, which I like. Just watching that happen was so impressive. I'm like, you don't even have as many hands as guys who are coming at you right now, and he still somehow bulldozed through all of them, and he just looks bigger. I mean,
I was
very
wrong.
excited for him.
I was wrong about the Chasen Johnson play. It wasn't him who chased down Johnny. It was Andrew Harris.
Okay.
The Chasen Johnson play that I was more impressed with before he buckled down and made that tackle on the open field was just a really tight coverage play where there was nowhere for the ball to be thrown, and he just was sticking on. It might have been Townsend. I'm not 100% sure.
Andrew Harris, Chasen Johnson.
It couldn't have been Townsend because it was
Andrew Harris, Chasen Johnson, good players, good players.
It's good to see. Ricky Barber had a sack. Like, so a lot of the guys you expect to be like really, really good.
We saw a good amount of Derek LeBlanc too.
Yeah. And then,
wearing what number?
88.
Bothering me. I know that it's not even for some reason it's just really bothering me. They don't look alike. They don't play the same position, and I'm just having a hard time with it.
Well, the joke you kept going with tonight was
Grant Stevens.
Yeah, Grant Stevens being Josh Seliskar because Grant Stevens wears 88 on offense. So
I decided sometimes I do dumb things in life, and my dumb thing for tonight was I just kept calling whenever a player did anything, I was just referring to them by whatever player I associate that number. Like I don't even know who 27 is now, but I just kept calling him Richie Grant every time he did anything. I think I called Risk JRP at one point. I don't know I don't know, guys. It's spring game. We're having fun.
Looking at my notes, there's not a lot else from the actual game itself, other than we just saw Grant Reddick was the one who kicked the field goals tonight, and then I don't know if Boomer is dealing with an injury or anything.
I don't think we need to read into that.
I don't think so. Reddick made a 38-yarder, and he just missed a 60-yarder.
The 60-yarder had the distance.
It was close.
It had the distance.
It was just a little bit right, I think.
I also felt like it was in the air for 6 years.
It did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's been a guy that, like, coming in, everybody would talk about the power behind his leg.
Yeah.
The other thing we have to mention was which is another thing we knew about, I think, going ahead of time, was Kobe Hudson got banged up earlier in spring, and they kind of limited him all spring. And then RJ Harvey didn't play tonight. Gus said that they haven't had RJ get tackled all spring. Did I hear that right?
He said that RJ was not live. Yeah. Spring, which to me makes sense, because what does RJ have to gain from, and that's been a thing under Malzahn since he got here. It's the whole treat him like pros thing. Like when a guy has the option to leave and comes back, they are treated differently. They're not put through the same thing. Because literally, what does RJ have to gain from being tackled for a month?
Literally nothing. RJ did, though, star tonight in the strongest arm competition.
He did it. The second half. Are we moving into skills talk now?
I think so. Is there anything else from the actual game?
I don't.
It flew by, and I think we covered it.
It felt like it was an hour. I mean, they moved through it very quickly. Dylan Risk had a moment here and there.
Tim, we were talking about Timmy. I don't know. I feel like Timmy's.
I don't know.
Like
Timmy's not going to be here. I don't know. Like, Timmy McClain looked like he had been teleported directly from the second half of the Baylor game onto the field of the spring game and played accordingly.
Was missing throws all over the place, but also ran for like 60 yards in the first quarter.
He like in the span of 10 minutes at one point had like an amazing run, and then also forced his own fumble at one point. Like Timmy's Timmy at this point.
You and I both said that, like, he's still so fun to watch. Like, it's just.
I hope that when he does transfer, he gets to start wherever he goes, like maybe at some lower level team, because he's just fun to watch.
I think it's his speed and his acceleration. Like, he looks like such a smooth runner when he's like in the open field. I don't know, it's fun.
Before we do skill stuff, portal is opening soon.
Yes.
Gus Malzahn said that they feel like they're in a good place with their current players, but they'll have to visit with some of them, and you never know, which is true. You never know.
Yeah.
It's prediction time. You got to put in one.
I got a sense of worry tonight. I don't know, when somebody asked about that, I was like, it could be anyone. Like, this is still so new to everyone.
Gus's tone was also a little, I don't know, maybe I'm reading into it.
Well, he said they'd have exit interviews with everybody and all that.
Which exit interviews are what led to Tommy Castellanos unexpectedly heading out at last year. It can be anyone. I don't
know. We made our predictions a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. Maybe we don't need to put in predictions.
I don't remember who I said, but
it's scary times, just because you never know.
It can be anyone, because the other team, the thing that like what makes it so scary is that I don't think a lot of these guys are, especially like the bigger names, I don't think they're like especially looking to leave or anything. I think it's just you get some of these situations where other teams are trying to fill their own needs, and some of these other teams have money, and you have to survive the portal. Both the one that opens at the end of the regular season, and then this one is like you have to just survive it the best you can. Hopefully UCF's able to do that.
There will be someone. There always is. You just hope it's not someone that we're going to have to do an emergency podcast over. I think it's just the boat we're always in.
I think that's like the guideline for it, is like if it's just kind of like, oh, that sucks, or like, all right, we got to get on the podcast.
I mean, I said to you, now that they've removed the grad transfer rules and the multi-transfer rules, it's like I said to you earlier today that there are 11,000 FBS players, and next week they all become free agents.
That was
so ridiculous.
You said earlier where you were like, not that this is going to happen, but you said this earlier. You were like, it's just so crazy because KJ could decide tomorrow, I don't want to play UCF anymore.
That's not a prediction. No, like, let me clear. I was just using it as an example of how crazy the portal is. I'm like, there is nothing stopping KJ from tomorrow waking up and saying, I want to go back to the SEC. Like, it's the Wild West. So you never know.
It has gotten crazy. But the skill stuff, which is, again, I said the first half of the game, which was actually the game, flew by. I feel like this flew by even quicker. This was all done in like 10 minutes. 10, 20 minutes. Gus on the mic is always electric, I guess.
Gus Malzahn on the mic was like a religious experience. What did
I tell you? I told you because I couldn't see him for a lot of the time when he was talking, and I was just hearing like a voice from above.
Booming. Everyone knows Gus's very distinct voice. It's so if you don't know what we're talking about, the second half they just do all kind of like fun skill stuff, like who's the fastest player on the team, 3 guys race, or what non-quarterback can throw the ball the farthest. And Gus Malzahn was narrating all of it, and just his narrations where he was taking this stuff seriously. My favorite of the night was he has the mic, the stadium PA mic, and Lee Hunter tries to catch a punt, and he gets his hands on it and drops it, and everyone goes, and Gus Malzahn takes the mic and goes, whiff, like that, so loud into the mic.
Whiff was one that when people didn't catch it, and the other one was doink.
He yelled doink. My personal favorite was RJ Harvey won the throw a ball the farthest contest, probably because he was a quarterback in high school. He threw it 68 yards, and Gus Malzahn takes the mic and goes, RJ Harvey threw the ball 68 yards, and he was wearing a watch. It was just so dramatic.
I'm trying to remember, because I know Trent Whittemore was in that. RJ Harvey was in it. Randy Pittman, right? Was the other one, or was it Colin Fox?
I think it was Jamarc Morris.
No, yeah, he was the other. There was 4 of them. I think it was Randy. And then Jamarc Morris. And Jamarc Morris and RJ actually tied. They threw it for 66 yards. It was 67 or
I thought
I think it was whatever.
matter.
And then the next one, I think RJ threw like a yard further or
Yeah.
something like that. And Gus kept referring to everything as the World Championship, even though this was happening with like
literally every
10
single
of the
time.
players on
They're
the
just getting
UCF
ready.
roster.
Every single one of these school things. All right, everybody, it's the World Championship of throwing the quarterback throwing the ball and just like random stuff like that.
Yeah. Johnny Richardson was the one who won the race as the fastest player.
He won it pretty handily.
They did the punts, the catching the punts, and Caden Kittler caught one, Malachi Lawrence caught one, and then we kind of had a little bit of, here and there. Like Ricky Barber caught one, but Paul Rubelt didn't catch one. It was kind of comical.
Should we talk about the blood feud that Gus Malzahn now has with the horse?
Yeah, we're gonna get there, I think.
Oh, was there more?
Well, there were just a few here, and I guess it doesn't really matter. Some of them caught him, some of them didn't. There wasn't like I was really waiting for like one of them had one kind of go over his head that he was like trying to like he almost made it was like the last one. It just missed it. And I was waiting for like some like really big like moment, but it didn't really happen. But yeah, the last thing of the night, which again was I think a bizarre thing to end on, maybe. We get the race and we get the introduction of, and they were hyping this all week because they had the video of Gus saying, all right, he's talking to the horse and in his office, which is a sentence that I just said. And he's saying like, all right, I'm gonna say 1, 2, 3, go. You got that? And okay, all
that. He screwed it up last year. He said on 3, and then he said 1, 2, 3, go. And Kenny the Citronaut ran, and the horse did not. The horse still won.
So then we get the big entrances. He says, I think Gus just says, bring out the knight, and then the knight comes out on the horse, and then he says, bring out the Citronaut, and it's Eric DeSalvo, the content king. Runs out right by me. I bet there was a video on Twitter if you want to go look at it. It was just one of the just a guttural yell, a scream. He's like, let's go.
I've never seen any human being more hyped for anything in my entire life, and I'm not even sure I'm exaggerating, than I was to see Eric DeSalvo as he ran out as the Citronaut. He was hyped. He was throwing oranges into the crowd.
Yeah. And then we also had like 2 or 3 I think boosters.
A few
boosters
donors also took part in the 40-yard dash,
and one of them won it.
One of them won. Kevin, shout out to Kevin. That was a little confusing because Gus at the end just goes, "Everyone, Kevin."
Yeah. So yeah, Gus says 1, 2, 3, go. I think there was a bit of a false start by Eric.
A little bit.
He also threw what we now know was carrots at the horse.
Actual carrots. Apparently to distract them.
Yeah, but the horse was already distracted apparently because the horse was like turned sideways when Gus said go. Yeah. Gus was not happy about it. He said in the post game for the horse race between.
I need to clarify if you didn't listen to Gus's press conference. Is the horse came up multiple times throughout this press conference, and at first Gus is just explaining what happened. He's like, "Yeah, Eric DeSalvo was out there, and the horse wasn't ready. Horse was sideways. Eric DeSalvo got the better of the horse." And then later in the presser, we've moved on. He's like, World Championship on the line, and the horse is sideways. He was so personally offended that this horse did not come to play. I couldn't get over it.
And then so I guess he also said that Eric has been under the weather, so he was like Michael Jordan.
Yeah, he said he lost by Jordan moment.
Lost by just a step to not the horse, but to Kevin.
Eric did beat the horse.
Because the horse because of the false start and because the horse was not paying attention. So
you think the horse was distracted by the carrots? Like, did the carrots?
No, because I think the horse was already turned sideways when Gus was starting his count, and then right before go is when Eric threw the carrots. I don't even know if the horse noticed the carrots.
This is why I love college football, because we did our pregame podcast of what to expect, and it's about what we see from KJ. And then there's a moment tonight where I'm like, I just watched a high-ranking UCF athletic official dressed as an orange pelt several carrots at a horse in an attempt to distract it so he can win a race against it, as Gus Malzahn, the head coach of the program, shakes his head in disappointment at the horse's effort. Like, that's a real thing that happened.
And then crowns the winner as Kevin. No, we didn't get a last name from Kevin. It was just Kevin.
The ending was a little awkward because then after that, it's like the crowd's like, "Oh, cool! Shout out to Kevin." And
just goes, "All right."
Just goes, "All right. We'll see you in the fall." And that was the end of the spring festivities.
Yeah.
But then all the fans got to come onto the field. They got to take selfies with the players and all that. It seemed like they were a very fun time. There's a rocket launch shortly after. It was a fun night. The spring games, it's hard to do them right because I just
what?
Nothing. I said do them right, and for some reason it triggered that very old video of Gus Malzahn when he was at Auburn and was asked what his favorite food was and said Mexican food, and they're like, "Oh, what do you like about Mexican food?" He's like, "Oh, chips, salsa, cheese dip." And then he ended it with like, "Yeah, if it's done well, I'll do it right," or something like that. It just made me think of that. But it was a fun night. It seemed like probably maybe 10, 11,000 people there. It was a solid crowd.
A decent crowd.
It seemed like a fun time.
And that's the thing, is like spring games are just for fun. Like it's a good, I think it's a good way for the players to end spring ball because they're working hard during the spring and they kind of get this experience in front of the fans, like get to play a little football, but also kind of just get to I think it's a good thing for the team, and it's good, I think, just for them to have fun with all the skills fun thing. And then I think UCF raises money with it too. So
the players were having fun. They were simulating special teams. Obviously, since the special teams are so dangerous, you're not going to do that in a spring game. And I don't even remember who the two players were who were fielding a punt, and one of the players just decided they're the only two guys on the field. I don't know where to go hard and like shove the other player out of the way.
It was the backup long snapper.
I think it was.
Was
it
his
Townsend?
Like,
he was.
I think it was. I think his last name's like it's like something Finnegan.
Out of nowhere, Townsend's just going to pick up the ball, and he like puts his whole body weight into trying to shove him to the ground. Everyone was just having fun. You can tell the players were just having a good time, and it was all pretty lighthearted.
Yeah, it was a good time.
That's why I don't want to overly read into the O-line did this, because it's like at the end of the day, it was a spring game where the players were mostly just
Aiden Fettigan was who like gave a little nudge to Xavier.
It was not a little nudge. The other part of the night that I think most fans did not see was Lee Hunter's unfortunate attempt to stop Dylan Risk from falling. Dylan Risk his momentum carried him out of bounds, and Lee Hunter put up an arm, I think in an attempt to like grab him, but instead ended up clotheslining him by the neck. And Lee Hunter looked quite alarmed afterwards.
Get ready to learn Lee Hunter, buddy.
Yeah, that was an unfortunate way to learn Lee Hunter.
Other thing, the thing I don't think we got to talk about it because I think it was later in the week. The Arnold Palmer Hospital for Children with the decals and how they were able to design and color those. That's just an awesome thing. And they asked KJ about it, and he said like the team had a really good like experience with that, and was talking about how it's just bigger than football, so it was really special. That was a really cool thing.
It's obviously a cool thing on the surface, and you see that, and it makes you feel good. You're like, that's nice. I'm glad UCF did that, but you hear about the players, how they've talked about it this weekend at this presser. They seem so touched by it, and some of the stuff we've heard, in the media from Arnold Palmer themselves is these kids were so excited about this, and I mean that is such a cool thing to say that you're going to draw this thing and we're going to actually have it on a football helmet in a real game. I don't know who came up with the idea from that. I don't know if it was more spearheaded by UCF or Arnold Palmer or whoever, but it's just that type of outreach is what makes UCF such an awesome member of the Orlando community. I mean, it's like, I think that it's rare for, especially in a major metropolitan city like Orlando, for a team like UCF to be so connected with that city. I don't think Houston has that connection with Houston. We know Cincy doesn't have it. We saw that firsthand with Cincinnati. There's nothing. And it's not like UCF is so connected to the city of Orlando just because, I don't know, they're good at football. It's because of things like that. It's because they really are just such an active and good member of the community. And it was just such a not difficult thing to do that was so cool and meant so much to so many people.
You see the pictures that they posted of like, some of the kids coloring them and just kind of the players with them, and they just looked happy. And like, I don't know, I think everybody has a soft spot for stuff like that, but I have a firsthand experience. Like my cousin, when he was 7, had a brain tumor, and I remember what it was like during that time, and remember all of the cool things. Like he had visits from players from the Rays and just like cool stuff like that. And you don't even, I think, grasp it. Even the players, I'm sure, as much as it was special to them, I don't think they could really grasp how much that means to the kids, to their families, and that kind of stuff is always really, really cool. So it was really cool to see that on the field tonight.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I also just the Knights versus Knots thing, I think, is just one of the things. Is UCF has so many things that makes it unique. So it's just like another one of those things where
it's a very college football thing. I think one thing that's been fun is UCF is, and it's, I guess I'm speaking a little more for me, I guess, just because I've been around the team, my whole life, just because my dad went here, but it's like UCF is so young, and it's been cool over the last maybe 10 years, maybe even less, to see. It's not like Oklahoma or it's not like Ohio State where you're talking about something from 1890. It's like we've watched them build these traditions in real time. We've watched Citronauts become a thing and the space game become a thing. Like it's really special because 100 years from now, like how Ohio State is now, UCF will still have these traditions and have these memories. And the fact that we've kind of gotten to be here as they've been built and been part of them is cool. And I don't know if we appreciate that enough, and how amazing it is to be fans of a young program where you're kind of helping lay that blueprint, that groundwork for future generations of fans. I don't know why I'm getting so philosophical and sappy at the end of this podcast, but I don't know. I think about that stuff sometimes.
And it's one of those things, again, like we can sit here and talk about what we saw at the spring game and from the football sense, but we're not going to get a ton out of that. And I think you kind of get this time of the year where it's like, it's good just for everybody to be together, I think, and get the fans like something to come out and do. Cause it's a long off season. And so getting a night like this kind of reminds you just like, all right, awesome. Like, this is great. We're working toward, the season coming around. And,
it's a community. I mean, it was great seeing, everyone out tailgating and having a fun time. I mean, that's, this is, the long night is here now. It's going to be 5 months of nothing. And I look forward to having
we get NCAA topics or 3 months.
It's not 3 months. It is 3 months. That's soon. I don't know why I so confidently declared it wasn't 3 months.
It's going to be all the time. Like I'll say something and you'll just, no. Oh, wait. Yeah, you're right.
I don't know why my gut instinct is to tell someone they're wrong before I'm even sure. Like I don't know.
A lot.
I do it. That's not just the podcast thing. Unfortunately, that is a real life trait I have. But yeah.
All right, I guess that'll be the end of that. I don't know how we ended there.
Can I end the podcast?
Yeah.
Okay.
What?
I'm gonna end the podcast. Can I do it?
Okay. I guess. Am I not doing the outro?
We'll see you all this fall.
All right.